Hey guys, if you still like us after listening to this podcast, do us a favor.
Go ahead and leave us a review on iTunes and maybe tell a friend because we're a pretty new show, and that helps us. That helps little dudes like us make it in this big old world. So, thank you again for listening, and have a good day, night. Coming up this week on We Still Like You. Casey Larwood will do anything for love, maybe even that.
I don't think I ever knew what it meant to be socially awkward until I had to make small talk with the gentleman of the woman I'm fucking.
Mike Gifford is going to see exactly how far the stranger's hospitality goes.
I was looking around the dungeon room at some of the old implements of torture that people used to use. Well, there I met a very nice aluminum siding executive, and he said that he'd be willing to take me back to his place.
And Riley Silverman finds out what even Google doesn't know.
I kept finding, over and over again, the sentiment from that medical thing, where it's like, you may not experience orgasms the same way anymore, and that was all it was. So I kind of, for the last year or so, was like, well, I just, getting off is not going to be a thing that I get to do that much anymore.
Welcome back to We Still Like You, the podcast. This is our Pride and Shame episode.
There we go.
Hey guys, welcome back to We Still Like You. It's me, Dan, and I'm here live from Jesse Paten's closet. I'm standing in the closet recording, and I'm going to share with you guys some excerpts from our Pride show. It was June when we did our last show at the Flatiron Theater, and we did a big show to celebrate Pride in Chicago and all across the nation. And coming up for you today, we have 3 of our favorite performances from some of our favorite LGBT comedians around Chicago.
I feel like we live in this generation where even straight women feel this social pressure to explore their sexuality with other women, especially when drunk. Personally, I think that's awesome. But as a lesbian, that's probably why.
Our first story comes to you from a cast member of 100 Proof Comedy at Comedy Sports in Chicago. It's a great show. You should check it out on Monday nights.
Give it up for Casey Larwood.
In this story, Casey thinks she's dating the perfect girl until she meets her boyfriend.
A couple years ago, I met this really fucking gorgeous girl, like Jessica Rabbit, with this really horny angel voice. And for some reason, she asked me out, and for some reason, we went on a date. Of course, it was too good to be true. She told me that she was bi, and that she was polyamorous, and that she lived with a man. But she needed a female companion as well in her life. And so she said she was kind of looking for someone to be with strictly physically. And I was just like, okay, so this woman just wants me for my body and doesn't want me to break down my walls and show her the flawed human that I am. Dope. So for a while, we were casually hanging out, and we were actually developing a friendship when we weren't fucking. We were watching bad TV together, and we would get takeout at 2 a.m. afterwards. And sometimes we would have sex, and then we'd go into her living room, and her boyfriend would be there. And I don't think I ever knew what it meant to be socially awkward until I had to make small talk with the gentleman of the woman I'm fucking. And when I met him, it did occur to me, oh, I'm gonna have to fuck him too eventually. That's I had asked her, is that the arrangement here? And she adamantly was like, no, of course not. I know that's not who you are. Do what's comfortable for you. And she said it in that way, when a guy takes a girl on a date and pays for everything, and he's like, you don't have to blow me. But it was heavily implied. And I didn't want to acknowledge that because we'll call it feelings. And I didn't want whatever we had to end. So I just kind of ignored it, hoping that it would never come up. On New Year's, she invited me to be her date because her boyfriend was working that night. And I was very excited, obviously, but I was also really sick. It was the worst cold of my adult life. Thankfully, my mother had given me some extra strength prescription daytime cold medicine. And so I felt great, which was dangerous because I forgot that I was sick and forgot that I took extra strength cold medicine. So at dinner at this party that we were at, I had a couple glasses of wine, half a glass of champagne, a little shot of whiskey, and then I don't remember the rest of the night. Yeah. I remember, it was very blurry, but I remember parts of it. I remember like us playing like a shitty card game that no one understood the rules, and I remember her friend Jody like very angry about pronouns, and I was not in the mindset to argue with her about it. I remember her boyfriend showing up and me acting too enthusiastic about it. And then I remember being at their apartment later that evening. And then I woke up the next day in their apartment. When he woke me up, he threw my dress at me the next morning. She wasn't there. He's like, yeah, we have to work, but we'll drive you home if you want. And I said, no, I'll rough it. And I walked home feeling a soreness like I've never felt before. And I was just like, oh, I did the thing as a lesbian I said I wouldn't do. And I just felt really depressed and kind of ashamed that I did this just to impress a girl that really wasn't my girlfriend. And I was also depressed because she didn't contact me for 3 weeks, which was a lot, even considering our casual arrangement. And in those 3 weeks, my period was 2 weeks late. Yeah, which movies taught me was the end of the world. And I just decided, like, I'll deal with it I'll deal with it later. And then I got a text from her saying, like, hey, you left a necklace at my apartment. And I was like, cool, I'll come pick it up. When I got there, she saw it in my face and she was like, you want to talk about it? And I was like, no, but like, let's. And we sat down. She's like, so how do you remember it? And I was just like, oh, bits and pieces, lying. And she kind of started describing what had happened, and I kind of just blurted out, like, I just want to know if I should have taken Plan B. And she looks at me and goes, well, he used a condom. Also, he was never inside you, Casey. And thank God, because that was 3 weeks ago. And I don't understand how Plan B works, apparently. She told me what happened. She didn't realize how drunk I was just because I was in and out. And the only reason she knew I was drunk because I kept falling downstairs, which explains the soreness. And she told me that when I got back to their place, I planted a kiss on him and basically said, this is what I want. Which should have been a clue to them. But they kind of knew, like, let's not take this too far tonight. So they did this position where I was, like, lying and she was servicing me and he was fucking her from behind. And I'm sure there's plenty of names for this position. If you know what it is, I don't care. Because I call it a brie sandwich. Because she was spread evenly between the two pieces of bread. Also, she liked brie sandwiches and I didn't, so I thought it was fitting. Thank you. So we came to the conclusion, she said, you pushed it really hard, but it was clear you were doing it because you thought that's what we wanted. And we really like you, Casey, but if you're not interested in both of us, I don't see this going any farther. So I took some time to think about it, and I finally I did the mature thing. I met up with them, and I got drunk, and we tried it again. And that bought me another 6 months, so it was totally fucking worth it. All right, thank you very much.
Once again, that was Casey Larwood. To see more of her, she does stand-up with 100 Proof Comedy at Comedy Sports every Monday at 8 p.m. Coming up next, we have a great story from a performer named Mike Gifford, who explores a brave new world of whips and chains.
This episode of We Still Like You is funded in part by microfunding through Art and Activism, a campus-wide program at Columbia College Chicago supporting student projects that expand beyond the classroom. Thank you, daddies. Daddy, 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 daddy.
Welcome back to We Still Like You, the podcast. This is our Pride and Shame episode, celebrating some of our favorite LGBT performers in Chicago.
Okay, coming up next, we've got a great performer that I'm very excited to have. I asked him if there's anything he wants to plug. He said that he's gay and wants to plug everything.
This next performer once read an essay at the shithole that I saw, and ever since then I've been like, this guy needs to do the show, and I'm so happy we finally got him on.
Give it up for Mike Gifford.
Thank you, Dan. Wow. Thank you all very much. I feel bad. I'm one of the people who runs this space during the week, and the guy in the top window on the left likes to masturbate sometimes. It's wonderful. Anyway, I'm Michael Gifford, and I'm a homosexual despite the ugly shirt. You see, these are the shoes of a gay guy who has given up. But it was just IML this past weekend, which is the International Mr. Leather Competition, which is one of the largest conventions in the city of Chicago, okay? Now, several years ago, I heard this author talk about bondage and whatnot, and it got me thinking, this is a whole world that I know nothing about, and I need to learn about this. And so I was reading a book by my favorite author, Harlan Ellison, and in that book, he wanted to write about street gangs in the 1950s. So in order to better understand them, because he was writing this in like 1957, he joined a street gang in order to write about it. Well, I took this lesson to heart whenever I wanted to learn about BDSM, okay? Now, you're probably wondering, what is BDSM exactly? Well, it's this. BD, bondage and domination. DS, discipline and submission. And SM, sadomasochism. Thus, BDSM is an umbrella term that covers many different kink and sex acts. Okay, pain's not for me, because I'm a dainty lady. However, bondage seems all right. I'm already kind of a lazy bottom as is. So, now you're probably wondering, where on earth do you meet someone who's going to teach me about bondage? Well, you would go to the Leather Archives and Museum up by Loyola campus that's housed in an old Jewish synagogue. That's where, open Wednesday through Sundays. Check it out. So, I went into the Leather Archives Museum, and on the walls they have these huge portraits done by this artist named Etienne or Dom Oriundis, and they're these huge muscle men with giant cocks. It's fabulous. And so as I made my way back through the archive and down the stairs, I was looking around the dungeon room at some of the old implements of torture that people used to use. They didn't just sell it online. They'd use homemade things like orange peelers or spatulas. You name it. They stuck it up their asshole. Fascinating. Well, there I met a very nice aluminum siding executive who knew an awful lot about bondage. And he said that he'd be willing to take me back to his place in order to show me all of his bondage toys that he had. Well, that sounded great, because he only lived a few blocks away. So we started walking back to his place, and he lived in this luxury condominium. It was beautiful. While he was constructing this massive sex swing in his bedroom, I sat on the living room couch. My host offered me a beverage. I accepted the ginger ale. As I sat there drinking my ginger ale, I couldn't help but notice on the mantle was a signed copy of When We're Very Young by the author A.A. Milne, otherwise known for creating Winnie the Pooh. Now that's novel, so I asked him, where on earth did you get this signed first edition copy? And he said that his grandfather, who was in the shipping industry, was friends with Milne, and he gave it to him as a present. Now that's pretty cool, because I love Winnie the Pooh. Then I got naked. So he strapped me up to his bed using the Velcro straps as opposed to the ropes. That was for my comfort. And he explained to me that if we weren't partners who knew each other very well, I could end the party a little earlier than the ropes would permit. How kind. Then he placed a regular old sleeping mask over my eyes. I like to think that it was leopard print, but who knows. Anyway, then he started getting different gloves. Now, he was explaining to me as he was doing this that some of the gloves had different textured surfaces, like bark or thumbtacks or a dog scratcher, all sorts of things. And those gloves would just be caressed across your body while your eyes are completely covered, so that if you would get an erection, you couldn't reach it and tug at yourself. But I stayed flaccid because, if I didn't mention, he was International Mr. Bear 1992. And even his hands weren't really my cup of tea, right? So that was nice. And since he had gone through the trouble of putting together that sex swing, I thought, well, let's do it. So he rolled himself into that sex swing, which took a little bit of time. And then he asked me to pull out his gimp mask, for you Pulp Fiction fans, out of his sex toy duffel bag. I then placed that over his head and zipped up his mouth and eyes shut. My kind host then instructed me to pull out this Reebok shoestring from his bag so that I could tie up his testicles. I'll demonstrate how that went down. Now, men of a certain age, their testicles either hang down really, really low, but when put into a stirrup position, they completely retract into the taintal region. They vanish entirely. So I sort of had to squeeze at them like it wasn't a fully formed zit yet, like it was red but not quite white yet, and it was a shoestring, so it kept slipping, and I felt like a complete failure. But finally, I really pressed and popped those puppies right out of his taint. And I knotted that shoestring up real good and tight. Then I attached it to a part on the chain so that whenever he tugged his balls a certain way, he'd get an erection. That was a Wednesday. Then I fucked him with a big black billy club cock. So, as I was fucking my kind host, International Mr. Bear 1992, I was looking at my naked self in a full-length mirror right in front of me. And I couldn't help but notice that this was somehow wrong, yet right, all at the same time. Well, you know, I learned something that day. That even though bondage isn't necessarily for me, you can't stay in your corner of the forest waiting for others to come to you. You have to go to them sometimes. So said Winnie the Pooh. Thank you.
Deep in the 100-acre wood, where Christopher Robin plays, you'll find the enchanted neighborhood of Christopher's childhood days. Winnie the Pooh, Winnie the Pooh, chubby little cubby all stuffed with fluff. He's Winnie the Pooh, Winnie the Pooh, willy-nilly silly old man.
And that was Mike Gifford, a great performer. You can see him all around Chicago. Be sure to keep your eyes peeled.
Pooh Bear, Winnie the Pooh Bear, looking for fun, chasing some honeybees. Pooh Bear, I know he's out there.
We've got one last story for you guys today, and it comes from a performer who is going to talk about something that we think is like right on the money for exactly what this show wants. This is a story about one of shame's worst byproducts, which is fear. It's an aspect of the trans experience that's very hard to find anywhere on the internet. It's actually very difficult to figure any of this out, and she did. So we're happy to bring you this next story from Riley Silverman.
This next comic coming to the stage to talk to you, she's awesome. She's one of my favorites. She's got an album out called Intimate Apparel that's fantastic. I highly recommend you get it. It's very funny. Please welcome to the microphone, Riley Silverman!
I had a story I was going to tell, and I realized driving over here that it was a bullshit safe story, so I'm not going to tell it, and I'm going to tell this other idea that I had instead. This is less of like a shame thing and more of a regret thing, but I'll start off. When I first started transitioning and I actually was like going to get hormones, they sit you down with like a list of all the side effects. They like talk to you and go, okay, so here's the things that can go wrong with you, and do you still consent to taking hormones? And when they sat me down, one of the things that they said was, you may no longer be able to get an erection, and you may no longer really experience sexual pleasure. And I was like, oh, so my entire life so far continues. That's cool. Fine. There's one little paragraph where it's like many patients discover other ways to enjoy sex, and maybe you and a partner can explore that. And that's all it said. That is not instructions for how to get off. That is like if you got in your car and your GPS and you were like, hey, I want to go to the store, they're like, well, there's lots of routes that you can go to the store. Maybe if you explore those routes, you'll find a way to get there. You would fucking throw the thing out of your car. You wouldn't be like, oh, this is definitely the one to go with. So that's all it was. And then I started thinking back to like my whole life. And then I realized it's so crazy to me how much my entire life I've never really understood how to enjoy sex. If I was with a woman, like she would have a lot of, like I was ready for her. I would get hard and then I would never come. And so for her, it was like, great physically, but also horrible for her entire mentality. And I understand this. It's horrible for your partner if you're like, I can't finish. You're not like, that's a thing. Like, okay, this is getting real uncomfortable. I'm sorry. The only time in my life I'd ever had sex where I could say that like partner thought of me as a woman was in 2006, and we were in Vegas, and like she was like exploring her bisexuality, I was exploring my gender identity, and we ended up getting drunk and having sex in Vegas, and I was wearing like lingerie. That was the only time in my life where I'm like, that was a really great sexual experience that I had, because I felt like I was me for like 10 seconds in the middle of that somewhere. It took me a long time to realize there's a very big difference between coming and orgasming. Like, that's not the same thing. And I've only recently realized that. I know I'm jumping around a lot. Sorry, I was asleep a minute ago. Or if you're listening, for my entire life. So I kind of, for like the last year or so, was like, well, I just, getting off is not going to be a thing that I get to do that much anymore. Cut to a few weeks ago, I was on Facebook and someone had shared a meme that was from Cards Against Humanity, where someone had combined cards. The first one was female hormones, or like transgender hormones, something, and the second one said the female orgasm, and then someone had put letters on it and said Cards Against Humanity knows what's up. And then almost every other trans woman that I know posted in the comments like, holy shit, yes. And then I was like, wait a second. We can come? And like, I didn't even come. Like, I just started reading comments and I go, oh, this is a thing that I did not know was a thing. I like started looking online. The thing is, like, I couldn't find like any resource online about it, and like I even like messaged the woman that I remembered like who had been on Tumblr, and I like never had talked to her before in my life, and I literally like sent her a message like, how do I do that? Like, how does that happen? And then she didn't respond, so I'm like, fuck. So then I like literally like Googled, and I like took like pages and pages. I kept finding like over and over again the sentiment from that medical thing, where it's like, you may not experience orgasms the same way anymore, and that was like all it was, over and over again. It's like there's like this weird scientific community conspiracy to ever let a trans woman know that we can fucking come. Like, people are like, oh, there is this one zine that you can get. Oh, great, so if I ever go to fucking Seattle, then I can have an orgasm. So then I finally found like one online webpage that like breaks down a few like descriptions on how you can make it happen. And even in that webpage, there is like a paragraph of like, you won't find this anywhere else on the internet. Do you know how easy it is to find anything on the internet? There are more web pages for people who are voting for Martin O'Malley than there are letting the world know that trans women can come with female orgasms. The thing is, I am such a gigantic prude because I've never really had the enjoyment of sex. So sex has always been like a thing where it's like, I don't know, it's fine. So whatever. So like literally like I had to like go online and ask a group of women that I know like, so if I was gonna get a vibrator, like what vibrator would I get? And everyone's like, fucking Hitachi, where have you been? Like everybody talks about that shit. Like I ordered a Hitachi off of Amazon, and then I also went to the Pleasure Chest, and it was the worst thing because I went there and there was like a group of women having a seminar on how to come at the Pleasure Chest, but like cis women, and I didn't want to walk up to that and be like, how does it work for me? Like I wasn't gonna be a good idea. So there's like one slacker dude working, and so like that's who I have to ask to give me the bullet, like, and then he didn't even know. I mean, how the fuck do you work? Apparently it's the easy. It's like going to McDonald's asking for fries. Like it's the one thing you have to be able to find. And so I was like super embarrassed. And there's always like couples there, and I look weird, so I'm like, oh, they're all gonna laugh at how weird I was when they're fucking later. That's cool. And so I got this little bullet thing, and I went home, and like that was fun. And then the Hitachi came the next night, and I don't know how I'm even here tonight to talk to you guys, because holy shit. Oh my god, like how do you even fucking walk with that shit? I mentioned that thing saying you may not enjoy sex. What they're really saying is we don't understand how a person with a penis can come unless it's from running, like just jacking off and whatever. That's it. Like they don't understand coming and orgasming not the same thing, right? So apparently there are lots and lots and lots of erogenous spots that have turned on once you start taking hormones. Because like I don't know, like people know this fact of like health that like male and female genitalia come from the same building blocks. Like you guys are aware of that. Like it's kind of like Legos. Like you could build a truck or you could build like a castle, but they're the same prong blocks or whatever. It's like that, and don't step on either in your bare feet. But that's like basically. Like it's not like hormones are gonna do some magical thing where like my genitals are gonna change shape or form or anything like that. But what is happening right now is that my body is starting to turn back on reactions to sensations that would have been there if they were facing the other direction, basically. And so I know it's a drop your wine moment. Trust me. It turns out like a lot of the things that are good for making women come are good for making this kind of woman come, and I didn't know that until like 2 weeks ago. So yeah, I'm 34 years old and I've just had my first orgasm.
Okay, so I feel like as a lady that's like a very like non-vibrator versus vibrator like stance. Are you full on like for the vibrator?
Well, here's the thing. I literally came for the first time this week, so I don't have a strong stance. Right now, I'm a real pro vibrator.
That's our show, guys. Thank you again so much for listening. We'll be back in 2 weeks. In the meantime, yeah, I guess I can come out of the closet now.
We Still Like You is produced by Dan Sheehan, Danny Gallegos, Tyler Snodgrass, Shannon Knoll, and J. Michael Osborne, who is also our resident live artist. In Los Angeles, it is produced by Andy Sell.
The podcast is produced by Jesse Pretend, engineered by Jesse Pretend and Sam Haas. Our theme song is Specific People by Jake Tobin. Big thanks to all the people who've housed our live shows at various undisclosed locations around Chicago, and to you, the listener, for being there.
If you'd like to know more about where you can watch We Still Like You or submit to be on We Still Like You, please check out our website, which is westilllikeyou.com, and also you can find us on Facebook.
Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.
Next time on We Still Like You.
So eventually, like, I do
start something because I'm like sandwiched in between these two people who are very aware that like sex is gonna happen, and I'm the one who has to initiate it. So her and I start having sex like on the floor in front of Hotel Transylvania and her husband. And it's pretty terrible sex.